Hey, everybody. I hope you're all having a great night. I'm really excited to be here, and I want to thank you so much for joining me and for joining my free webinar group if you're in my Facebook group, or for subscribing to my YouTube channel if you're here on YouTube. So tonight we're going to talk about how and why to teach letter formations in groups. And this is a topic that I love to talk about because I think it's so helpful, especially nowadays when kids' curriculum is so difficult. But before we get started, I just want to make sure that my microphone sounds good. Is anyone there? Are you guys able to hear me? Not seeing any comments. Oh, there we go. Hi, everybody. Thanks. Oh, that was just like flooded in. Oh, Ashley, my beautiful niece, has come to join. I told her she'd better. She's going to be a teacher. Thanks for coming, Ash. Okay, so if your comment says Facebook user, I just want you to know I'm using a program called StreamYard. So if you could go to StreamYard.com/Facebook, you're just going to give them permission to use your names. This way, if you have a question or anything like that, I'd be able to answer you and address you by your name. So I hope that you will do that for me, okay? StreamYard.com/Facebook. I'm excited for this too. I'm so glad that my sound is awesome because about an hour ago, I was on a Zoom about something really important. I'm going to tell you about it in a little bit. And my Zoom colleagues were telling me that I sounded all funky and I was having a slight panic attack. So I'm very glad that the sound is awesome. Cool. Okay, so I just want to tell you a little bit about myself before we get started. My name's Jamie Spencer. I'm also known as Miss Jamie OT. And my mission out there in life is to help you to help your kids. So whether they are your students that you work with because you're a teacher or a therapist, if it's your child or your grandchild, if you're a caregiver, I want to help you and give you knowledge and tools that you can use in order to help your kids thrive and do better. I love being an occupational therapist. I've been a school-based occupational therapist for 20 years. So this is absolutely my passion, and I love teaching people about OT and about how to help their kids. Another thing about me is that I am a huge advocate for school-based occupational and physical therapists, particularly in New York, because that's where I'm from. So I have this little picture up here. Hey, New York school OTs and PTs. I just wanted to let you know that I'm so excited. I'm going to be presenting at the NYSOTA conference this year. So I hope that if you're going, you'll check out my Conversations That Matter. And I'm also so excited and honored to say that I'm going to be one of the keynote speakers at the AOTA Child and Youth Specialty Conference in December. So I'm really excited about that. And I'm going to be talking about a topic that I'm very passionate about. So if you're a New York OT or PT who works in a school, I'm looking for you in particular. I am doing some research with Touro College. I'm an adjunct there, and I'm begging for your help. Can you please take a survey for me about what it's like to be a school professional in New York? You can get the survey on my Miss Jamie OT Facebook page. I just pinned it to the top. You can't miss it. So I really hope that you'll help me out by doing that. So before we get started, if you have any questions, if you have any concerns, if you try to download something and it doesn't work, or you have any problems with your files, I absolutely want to help you. But please email me at customerservice@missjamieot.com. That is the best way to get me and for me to know what you need and to get to you. In this day and age, with all of the social media that we all have, I have an Instagram, I have a Facebook, I have, everything. So sometimes people will contact me through one of those other channels and they'll ask me about something that they had trouble with and I don't see it for a while. So I feel terrible about that. I always want to get back to you. So if you need something from me and it has to do with this webinar or something that you try to download, please email me at customerservice@missjamieot.com and I will help you as soon as I can. So I want to make sure that you get your freebie. Today with this webinar, I'm giving away a 32-page packet of letter formation worksheets. And these are worksheets that I personally use all the time at work. That was why I wanted to do this webinar, because I just found them to be so helpful. They saved me so much time, and I want you to save time too. It's the time of Corona. We're all a little stressed, and our poor kiddos are really being bombarded with a lot of curriculum at once, and we're trying to catch them up. So make sure you download the freebie, okay? It's right there at missjamiot.com/HW freebie. If you are a school occupational therapist and you'd like to get some CEUs for this, I'm very proud to say that this is AOTA approved. So if you'd like CEUs, you can purchase them, but you don't have to. So the information is here, it's out there. I want everyone to benefit from this information because it's only going to help us and help our kids. But if you're an OT and you need some CEUs, which I know we all do, you can get your CEU assessment at missjamiot.com/HWCEU. You'll also get a copy of all of the slides from this webinar. And I do have a workbook that accompanies this webinar. My method that I'm going to talk to you about soon, you can use it with any handwriting program. So the sheets that I've developed can, again, be used in conjunction with any handwriting program. So if your school may be using Foundations, or maybe they're using Handwriting Without Tears, maybe they're using Start Right or Right Start. There's so many different programs out there. The packet that I put together, the freebie packet, works with every program, and so does my workbook. So I'm proud to say that, because I myself, in my school district, we've changed programs a few times, and it's important to follow the program that your school is using, but at the same time, there are many aspects about handwriting that are the same, no matter what program you're using. So I have developed a workbook that I really love. I think I love it because I made it the way that I wanted it to be. And when I develop products, I'm always looking for, I like this, but I wish that it kind of had that. And so that was how I developed this workbook. It's over 100 pages. It has every letter and number individually, and it also has them in groups. And that's what we're going to talk about, which letters you can teach at the same time. They're on the same page. So when you need to save time and you don't have time to teach every single letter individually, these pages are great for that. And they're also really good for practice and reteaching the letters. That helps our kiddos to get it. So in your freebie packet, we have these 2 pages. I kind of love these. They're like a cheat sheet. We're going to talk about teaching the letters in developmental order. And I've listed it here for you. So this is an awesome, awesome handout to give to parents, to put in the kids' folders, to take home, to hand out to teachers if you're a therapist. It's just, I think, it's very simplified, and it just makes a lot of sense. So I have an uppercase letter page and a lowercase letter page. If the handwriting program that you're using is in alphabetical order, you can use these pages to supplement and to teach you which ones are easier to learn and which ones go together. This is basically like the cheat sheet that you need to know. So why I felt that this webinar is needed, there is a lot less time for handwriting instruction. Back in the old days, kids used to have a lot of time to learn this. And nowadays, especially, unfortunately, with everything that's going on with COVID, our teachers are under so much stress to cover so much material that there's just less time for handwriting instruction. And what happens is that children who haven't mastered basic handwriting tasks, basic strokes or basic letters or shapes, they're forced to move on too quickly to keep up with everyone else. And what's upsetting about this is that they haven't mastered it. And so how are they supposed to move on if they haven't developed the skill that we taught them yesterday? So that's, first of all, upsetting for the kids. It's a little stressful, and it doesn't make them feel successful. So as educators, as parents, as grown-ups who are trying to support our children, we want them to build upon the skills that we have, that we're showing them. So this program is universal. It works with any handwriting program that you're using. And I really do hope that you are using a handwriting program. It's important. It works with teachers, parents, and therapists, because it's not rocket science. It's pretty obvious. Once you kind of listen to the whole thing and you look at it, it's kind of like an aha moment. Oh, that makes so much sense. It's also research-based. I've included a lot of information from different resources and different handwriting programs that are going to help you. And the biggest thing is that it builds on prior learning. So in the education field, we call this scaffolding. We teach a child something and then we teach them the next step. So it makes sense. It's like we don't expect a child to run before we teach them how to walk. And the same thing with math. We don't teach them how to do division before we teach them how to do addition. When it comes to handwriting, it's the same thing. We can't just jump ahead 6 steps. We've got to make sure that our kiddos have those foundational skills. And most of all, this is practical. It saves time, which is always, always helpful in the school setting. The objectives we're going to cover today are to identify 4 reasons why teaching letter formations in groups is more effective than the traditional A to Z method. So by A to Z method, I mean capital A and lowercase a, and then capital B and lowercase b, and so on and so on. We are going to learn how to teach the letters in groups in developmental order. I also want you to recognize which letter formations will be taught together and understand that motor planning plays a role, not just a role, but a major role in handwriting development. And we're going to go over all of that. Handwriting dysfunction occurs in 25% to 33% of school-age children. So that's more than a quarter of our children in school. That's a lot of kids. And occupational therapy practitioners are often referred children with special needs who have handwriting issues. But the thing is that there's a lot of kids out there that have handwriting issues that aren't labeled as special education children. And maybe they're not special education children. They might just need a little extra help. They might just need more practice or more time to gain the skill and master it before they're forced to move on. And very, very sadly, that often doesn't happen. Research shows that it is appropriate to teach kids at least twice weekly for at least 20 minutes. That's not to say it's not better to practice every day for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, but at the very least, you want to practice at least twice a week. So Hoy et al. Had this great article, and I refer to it a lot throughout this webinar. And he said, it's reasonable to believe that improvements in letter quality precede improvements in speed. So that makes total sense. The kids need to learn how to make the letter correctly and neatly before they get fast at it. And when they get fast at it, it becomes automatic. But we don't want it to become automatic when it's messy and all the lines are wonky and there's spaces and gaps in their letter. We want it to become automatic when it's neat. So it's important to practice those letters and teach them how to make them correctly before we move on and hope that they're developing speed. Speed doesn't come first. So when you teach letter formations in groups, number one, it saves time. And I know this is a huge concern for teachers. I work in a school district with 10 buildings, 6 elementary schools. We have about 40 to 50 kindergarten and first grade teachers. And these teachers are amazing. They are angels. They work so hard and they have so many children with all different issues. And they have a lot to cover. By teaching letters in groups and by grouping them with more letters at a time, it's kind of like killing 2 birds with 1 stone. You're increasing your efficiency. You're using previous learning that the kids have, like I said before, scaffolding. You're also relying on the kids' motor planning and their motor memory. We want them to develop that automaticity so that handwriting isn't so hard. But the fact that it's such a time saver is a big plus. Oh, I'm so excited. So Facebook user, go to StreamYard.com/Facebook and give them permission to use your name. But you say, where was the link to get your free letter formation worksheets? And before this webinar, I made this banner because this happened to me last time. Everybody was asking and I hadn't done that. So you can get it at MissJamieOT.com, HW freebie. So I'm going to tell a little story about two cheerleaders, and I think this story really kind of just exemplifies the whole point of this webinar. So my two cheerleaders are named Francesca on the left and Grace on the right. Francesca and Grace were both dying. Woo, sorry about that. Francesca and Grace were both dying to go to cheerleading camp. They couldn't wait to be a cheerleader. They wanted to be a big girl like their sister, and they just couldn't wait to start. So their parents signed them up for cheerleading camp. They were just over the moon excited. They were telling everybody about it. They couldn't wait to go. They couldn't wait for their first day. And so when they went, they had two very different experiences. Francesca went to cheer camp, and on the very first day, she learned a cheer called Victory. She practiced the moves really hard. She tried really hard. She did it over and over, and she was so excited. Look how cute she is in her little uniform. She got in the car and went home with her mom, and she practiced, and she told her parents, I'm going to be so good at this. I'm going to practice every day. I'm going to be just like Jessica, her big sister. So the next day, she gets in the car and she's all excited to go. And she'd been practicing that cheer Victory, and she felt really good about it. And when she gets to camp, the coach teaches her a whole new cheer. So instead of practicing Victory, and she was so excited to show that she'd really been practicing and that she got it, instead of practicing Victory, they learned a new cheer called Success. So Francesca was like very surprised. What's going on here? I thought that we were going to finish the Victory cheer, or at least practice it a few times and make sure that we're doing it right. But no, they went on to the next cheer because the coach wanted to cover everything in the week that they were in cheerleading camp. So she learned the cheer Success. The following day, she learned a new cheer, and this cheer is called Battle. So now the cheers are all jumbled up in Francesca's head. She's not sure what she's doing. She's mixing up the moves. She's mixing up the words. She doesn't feel successful, and she's really upset and sad. And she told her mom on the last day, you know what, Mom, I'm just not good at this. I just can't get it. And it's just not for me. So her mom felt really badly because she was so excited to do it. And then, within a week, she totally changed her tune. She didn't feel successful and she wasn't happy about camp. Then we have Grace. Grace was just as excited as Francesca. She couldn't wait to go to camp. On her first day, she learned the cheer Victory too. And she did exactly what Francesca did. She went home, she practiced, she showed her dad and her brother. She wore her little uniform around all day. She was so excited. And the second day, she went in and the coach reviewed the cheer Victory. And then once the coach made sure that everybody had that cheer down, she added another step to the cheer. So they had the first few steps from the first day, and now they added another step. All the girls felt happy. They felt successful. They had mastered the first part, and now they're learning the second part. On the third day, the coach practiced day 1 and day 2 together, and they finished the cheer. So they practiced what they learned. They reviewed it. They added a little more, and then they practiced it again. So Grace had a great time at camp. She was so happy. She felt like such a big girl. She was bursting with excitement, and she felt like cheerleading is the best thing that ever happened. The moral of the story is if you confuse them, you will lose them. It's really important that we make sure that we give our kids time to master the things that we're teaching them. We can't just move on because that's our agenda. And unfortunately, it's easy for us to say that, but it's not always easy for it to happen. Teachers have a certain curriculum that they've got to cover. So they can't kind of wait while one child struggles to catch up. This is why it's great to send home handwriting practice. It's great as a parent if you see that your child is struggling with something to follow up and do some repetition and practice those letters, because we don't want to confuse our kids. That's the last thing we want. We want them to feel successful. We want them to have a great career in school, and we want them to be successful at handwriting because it is something that will follow them for the rest of their lives. Motor planning is a really important part of handwriting, Any new motor skill, if you think about anything that we learned, do you remember learning a new dance for the first time back in the old days, and we all learned how to square dance, or we all learned the Macarena? It took us a while. We had to practice it over and over, and it was really important that we did practice it over and over. Otherwise, we never would have gotten it. Motor planning is the potential to organize and plan a goal-directed movement. And this is a really high priority prerequisite for any sequential movement. So I'm going to tell a story about something that happened to me, which really made this, it just hit home. I wanted to join Zumba. I decided it was going to be so fun to join Zumba because I'd be able to dance and have fun with music, but also work out and burn some calories and sweat. I was going to get healthy. I got myself a great new outfit for Zumba. I was all ready. And I go to Zumba and I was a mess. I didn't know any of these movements. Everybody in the class knew what they were doing, and they were going, up a step, down a step, forward, backward. They were chanting. They were doing all these things, and I didn't know anything that was going on. And I really didn't like it. I didn't like that I didn't feel successful. I didn't like that I didn't know what everyone was doing, or that everyone else knew what they were doing, but I didn't. That stunk. So I'm anti-Zumba from there on, which is not good of me. I probably should have given it another chance, but I just didn't like it. Transfer of learning. When our goal is for children to transfer the new skill, we want them to write a letter correctly, and then we want them to transfer it to a natural situation. So when we teach them how to write a letter, we then want them to be able to write that letter in other situations, like writing their name in class. It's easier to transfer learning when the motor components are similar. So for example, when it comes to writing, a child who's learned the letter R, a lowercase r, will easily learn a lowercase n, because you can see how similar they are. And they're similar in terms of their formation and in terms of the motor movement. So for Zumba, I didn't have any transfer of learning because I didn't know any of the movements at all, and it was just not pretty. I don't know if any of you guys have ever tried Zumba. I don't recommend it. I don't recommend it at all. Motor planning and automaticity. So when a handwriting requires little to no effort, it becomes automatic. So I always refer to when we get so comfortable driving that we drive to work and all of a sudden we're like, oh my goodness, I'm at work. I didn't even remember driving here. We're so comfortable and we're so skilled at it that it doesn't take any effort. And this is what we want for our children when it comes to handwriting skills. This is usually achieved between 3rd and 5th grade, but not always. Automaticity is a strong predictor of handwriting speed, and that makes a lot of sense. So if a child doesn't make the letter the same way every time, if it's not automatic, if it's not comfortable, they're not going to become fast at it because they need to sit there and think about every stroke and every movement. And then that's going to decrease how much detail they put into their work, how long their work is, the quality, the quantity. It all goes together. So it is really important that motor planning is considered when teaching kids how to write. We've got to Mr. Miyagi our kids. So if you haven't seen Karate Kid and you're watching this webinar, I hate to say it, but I want you to log off and go to Netflix. You have to see The Karate Kid. It is an important part of life. And it really exemplifies the theory of motor learning. So if you haven't seen Karate Kid, I'll do a little recap. There's a boy named Daniel, and he really, really wants to learn how to do karate. But he has this little cute, sweet old man, Mr. Miyagi, who's in his neighborhood, and Mr. Miyagi agrees to train Daniel. But when Daniel shows up at his house, Mr. Miyagi makes him do all this other stuff. He says, I want you to wax my car. I want you to paint my house. I want you to paint my fence. And Daniel's getting all mad because he really wants to learn how to do karate, but he feels like he's just doing Mr. Miyagi's chores. So finally he blows up. He has almost a temper tantrum basically at Mr. Miyagi. Someone saying wax on, wax off. So you guys, if it says Facebook user, go to streamyard.com/Facebook, and then I can see your name. I want to know who loves Karate Kid as much as I do. So Daniel blows up at Mr. Miyagi and he's like, "You're making me do all your chores. You promised you'd teach me how to do karate." Mr. Miyagi says, "Calm down, calm down. Show me how to wax the car." And Daniel starts to do the movements, and Mr. Miyagi shows him that that was how to block a punch. And then he does paint the fence, again, how to block a punch. So basically, Mr. Miyagi had Daniel working out and practicing these movements over and over and over to develop motor memory. But Daniel didn't even know that he was learning karate. And this is what we need to do with our kids. When we're teaching handwriting, we want to teach them the same moves over and over so that it becomes automatic and they don't even know about it. You know what I mean? It should just be simple and easy. So when you think about handwriting, you want to think, how can I Mr. Miyagi my kids? I'm going to teach them these same movements over and over until it's a piece of cake, until they are a karate star. Now, if you haven't seen Karate Kid, I'm really upset with you. So please, okay, don't leave the webinar, but after the webinar or maybe Friday night, definitely go to Netflix and watch it. It is just an absolute awesome movie and a total classic. We also can't ignore natural development. So I'm going to talk about what's natural development and which letters go with that. By the age of 2 years, 10 months, children should be able to make a straight vertical line. So if you look at the little pink line I have over here, it's not perfect. It's a little wobbly, but it's pretty good. But it's just a line. It's not a letter. It's just a line. By 3 years, they should be able to do a horizontal line. So if we look over here at our capital letters and a couple of lowercase, all of these letters have vertical and horizontal lines. But it's not just a vertical line or a horizontal line. The only one that's really simple and easy is the letter L and the number 1. Everything else has multiple steps to it. So then we have to really think about it. Is it realistic for us to ask a 3-year-old to write their name when all they're supposed to really be doing is making a line? Then at 3 years, they should be able to also make a curved line or a sloppy circle. So again, look at the pink mark. It's just a curved line. It's not a perfect circle. It's not an O. It's just a circular scribble, really. And look at all the letters that have curves in them. I mean, almost all of them. That's a ton of letters. Capitals, lowercase, and numbers have so many curves in them and straight lines. So while our kids are finally developing the ability to make a circle or a circular scribble, sometimes they're being expected to make letters that have very controlled small curves as well as straight lines. We can't ignore natural development. By the age of 4 years and 7 months, children should be able to make a diagonal line facing left or facing right. So this is what I think is kind of an aha moment. If we think about the letter A, it has both of those diagonal lines in it. Very often, the letter A is the first letter that's taught, and it's one of the hardest because it has diagonal lines. It's not horizontal lines or vertical lines. It's diagonal lines, which are the hardest or the oldest age. So it just makes a lot of sense to think, why are we teaching one of the harder letters first just because it's alphabetical? We really don't need to. When you think about that the fact that we might be teaching letter sounds or the how to read, but we don't have to teach reading when we teach writing. They don't have to go together. And I think that's kind of something that in the past, traditionally, it always was, but it doesn't have to be. For visual milestones, I just want to go over some of the things that our kids developmentally are supposed to be able to do. And the reason I keep really highlighting that developmentally is because very often our curriculum does not match what our children are developmentally able to do. So unfortunately for OT, the way that this really hits home for me is that I'll have a child maybe in kindergarten who's really struggling, and the teacher is concerned because he can't keep up. He can't do what all the other kids are doing. But when I test him, he comes up on the low average range. The thing with this is that my testing is developmental. It's looking at, is this child doing what he should be able to do for his age? And usually he's a little behind for his age, but in the classroom, that translates to being a lot behind. And that's upsetting because it's not always it's not the child's fault. Developmentally, he is where he is, but the curriculum isn't keeping up with the kid's developmental level. So at 4.5 years old, our children should be able to complete or close a simple drawing. So I put this circle up here. If they see a circle, they could say, oh, that's a circle, and they could close it. By 4.11, 4 years, 11 months, they could recognize a familiar object while only seeing a piece of it. So an example of that would be maybe a piece of a puzzle that might be hiding underneath a rug, and they understand that that puzzle piece is probably a cow because they see the spots or something like that. At 5.5 years, they're able to name most uppercase letters and some lowercase letters. So now 5.5 is usually the middle of kindergarten. They're supposed to be able to name most uppercase and some lowercase by the middle of kindergarten. As far as I'm concerned, if I have a child who's doing that in kindergarten, they're probably going to be flagged as behind because they're expected to know most of their letters, if not every one of them, by the middle of the year for sure. 5 years and 11 months, they're supposed to be able to guess what someone is drawing when it's only partially done. So I put this house here. I think most children might be able to look at it and say, oh, I think you're going to be drawing a house. In a little while, I'm going to be talking about this milestone and how often in handwriting curriculums, this milestone is not taken into consideration, especially when we're giving our kids worksheets that have dotted letters. Someone's saying, do we get access to your presentation and slides? So my slides are included in the CEU package, and you can get that right here. Other people are saying, how do we get the rest of the presentation? They came on a little late. This replay will be available in this group and on my YouTube page until November 30th. So you can watch it anytime you want until November 30th. So handwriting milestones. At 5 years, a child should be able to print their first name with the letters large, unclear, awkward, or reversed. That's completely normal. It's developmentally appropriate and acceptable. At 5.5 years, they should be able to print their first name in capital or lowercase. So capital letters, we're going to talk about that in a little while when we talk about developmental order. But capital letters are easier for kids to write. And that's because they're larger, number one, and because they have less strokes. They are straight lines, curved lines, or diagonal lines. They're not multiple movements that require a lot of dexterity and precision, and they're not small, requiring in-hand manipulation like some of the lowercase letters are. So for me personally, I don't mind if children write their name in capital letters, but I know a lot. In fact, almost every single kindergarten teacher I know, it's a pet peeve of theirs, and they want children to be able to write their name with a capital first letter and the rest lowercase. That's okay. I mean, I can understand where they're coming from. They say that it's a very hard habit to break. I always kind of go to the whole, well, are they going to be doing it when they're 30? I doubt it. So it's not the end of the world. But then again, I'm not a kindergarten teacher, so I probably shouldn't say anything about that. All the kindergarten teachers I know feel this way. They want kids doing one capital and then the rest lowercase. So that's fine. I just feel that when we're teaching the lowercase letters, it's easier to teach them in groups so that the kids can, again, build on that knowledge of the letter they learned the other day. When kids are 6, they should be able to print the numbers 0 to 9 and all of the letters. So 6 years old is generally the end of kindergarten or the beginning of first grade. That's when they're supposed to be able to print all their letters. So I'm hoping the rest of you are kind of having a light bulb moment right now. There's a big disconnect between what's developmentally appropriate and what our curriculum is expecting of our kids. After they're 6, about 6.1, they should be able to print 3 simple words with more than 3 letters without copying. So I put this simple sentence here, the cat is brown. It's not perfect. There is no space in between is and brown, and they put a capital T by accident. But this is printing 3 simple words. This is what's age appropriate for 6 years old. So I don't know about the rest of you guys, but in my district, my kindergarten teachers are miracle workers because our kids are writing sentences. They're writing, I mean, by the end of the year, they're writing on loose leaf, they're writing small, they're writing sometimes, I don't want to say paragraphs, but yeah, they're pretty much writing paragraphs. I don't know how the kindergarten teachers do it. I know it's a lot of work. And most of the kids are able to do it because the teachers work so hard with them, the kids try so hard. But we are always going to have those kids that just can't do more than what's developmentally appropriate. And it's really important for us to be aware of that. Just checking in to see if we have any more comments. Do we have a reference for this order? Yes, the reference for the order that I'm talking about is in your freebie packet. I hope you downloaded it. If you did not, it is here. There's a two-page packet. There's a two-page cheat sheet that gives you the letter order that I'm talking about. But we're going to go over it in a few minutes anyway. But that's where you can get it. And someone's saying in North Carolina, they're supposed to write their name to include uppercase and lowercase. It makes me so mad. I'm not sure what that means. What do you mean include uppercase and lowercase? Keywords, the teachers work with them. Yes. Oh my goodness. My teachers in my school district are, I can't even go on enough about them. And they're so patient and so kind, but they really do understand that there is a big difference between what the children developmentally are supposed to be able to do and what the state is expecting of them. It's a big disconnect. It really is. So one thing I always like to refer to is that the kids can only work with what they've got. We can't expect them to perform motor skills that they don't have or that they're not capable of. Picture yourself going through your day with a pair of rubber gloves on. How would you do? How would you function? Would you be able to type? Would you be able to put your earrings on? Would you be able to write neatly? Probably not. But this is where our kids are at. They don't have the dexterity that we have. They don't have the motor skills that we have, and they can't do what we can do. So it is really important that we understand that and that we don't put that pressure on them. And again, I'm saying this, but I know as teachers, there are certain standards that you've got to get the kids to meet. And that's a lot of stress on you. And I'm sure you're doing an amazing job. I'll tell you that right now, because you're here on a weeknight trying to learn how to help your kids. But give yourself some credit that they can only do what they can do. They have these rubber gloves on because that's where their body is at right now. They don't have the dexterity to thread a needle. They don't have the dexterity to make tiny little moves with their pencil and to stay within the lines and to do all these tiny intricate things that we're capable of. And it's important for us to remember that. Sometimes when we see a child who's struggling with something that we might think is simple, we've got to kind of take a step back and think, well, if I had rubber gloves on, could I do that? Because motor wise, that's where our children are at. They don't have the sensory tactile awareness that we have. They don't have the motor planning that we have. And they definitely don't have the dexterity that we have. So that's a good kind of way to kind of maybe put it all in perspective. And I think it's a good example to give to their parents too, because I know sometimes parents who aren't in the education field, they feel like they want their child to be able to do everything. And, why is he struggling with his letters? And I very often say, well, it's kindergarten. This is where they're learning their letters. Or it's first grade. He's been, it's summer. He just got back to school. We have to give the kids a little leeway. But we also have to remember that they're not adults. They don't have the motor skills that we have. And that's important for us to remember. So we're going to talk about traditions versus current trends. In the past, it used to be all about reading, writing, and arithmetic. I remember when I was a little kid in my school, we had this big bulletin board, and it used to say the 3 R's: reading, writing, arithmetic, and they all started with an R. It was like very cute. But nowadays, it's really about reading and about arithmetic. And we have to, as people who aren't teachers, it's important for us to recognize that the teachers are being judged and being very often graded and evaluated on their children's scores in reading and math. So very, it becomes very apparent why handwriting might slip down a little bit lower on their list of priorities. They're not being evaluated on it. They're not being judged on their children's abilities in handwriting. Generally, it's not even on the report card. So, of course, they're going to focus their attention on the kids' reading lessons and the kids' arithmetic lessons. It just makes sense. And you can't blame the teachers at all. This is what our nation or our countries are putting forward. They want our kids to excel in these areas because they know it's important, but at what cost? We do want our children to also be able to write a letter or, basically communicate their needs in handwriting. Tradition also says that we can teach capital A and lowercase a, and then, capital B and lowercase b all throughout kindergarten. In the old days, again, and I'm dating myself because I grew up in the old days, but kindergarten was for playtime. We learned how to play, we learned how to share and socialize. We had nap time. I mean, it was a different world back then. But we finished kindergarten knowing the letters. Someone's saying the free handwriting link isn't working for me. Oh no, that's horrible. Okay, I will get it. Well, I will get it for you guys. Don't worry. Remember what I said. Email me at customerservice@missjamiot.com. But also in this group, in my previous webinar, I did this exact presentation before. All the links are in there. So I'm very sorry about that because I checked them. Obviously, I didn't check them correctly. I will get everybody the freebie though. It's a 32-page packet. It's awesome. So I want to make sure that you have it. Whoop. Okay, so the reason that it used to be okay to teach capital A and lowercase a and then capital B and lowercase b is because the children were 6 or 7 when they were learning these skills. So that makes a lot of sense when you think about it. Back in the past, kids used to learn how to write in first grade. Sometimes kids didn't even go to kindergarten. So they certainly didn't learn their entire alphabet and all their numbers and Common Core math in kindergarten. They were just learning the basic skills of how to socialize, how to, how to deal with a structure, a routine, how to get to school, get up, get out of school. They weren't learning what they're learning now. So it was okay when they were learning capital A, lowercase a, because they were old. They were able, remember, if we go back to what kids are able to do, they were already able to make diagonal lines because they were 6 years old or 7 years old. They had the fine motor skills. They had the manipulation to do that. Kindergarten and first grade were totally different back then than they are now, and that's important for us to remember. Back in the day also, they used to combine reading and writing, and sometimes that still does happen. Sometimes the reading program incorporates writing, and I find very often as a handwriting specialist that the writing isn't appropriate. So they may teach the word, they may be teaching the sound ja, and they teach the letter J, but then they have the child write the word jump, but the children didn't learn UMP. So that doesn't make any sense. They're basically asking them to draw something that they've never learned, have never drawn before. So they're definitely not going to become skilled at it. So what do the kids do? They do whatever they can to please their teacher and get something on paper. Generally, what's happening is that we're ignoring developmentally appropriate practices. That's what's happening today. And that's unfortunate, but it is how it's going. It's how the cookie's crumbling, unfortunately. The real focus is on literacy and math, and that means there's limited time for handwriting remediation. There can be ways to incorporate handwriting into the school day in many ways. There could be an RTI program. There may be an assistant in the room that may pull children who are struggling. But the typically developing kids need help too. It's not just the children who are lower or the children who have special education needs. It's time for all the kids to get the help that they need. And that's why I developed this free packet that I want you to have and that I will get you in a little while. Unfortunately, very often regular kids who just have poor handwriting, they don't receive any extra help about it. And it's really not addressed until the children are expected to write so much that it becomes apparent that this handwriting issue is impacting what they can do. So someone's saying there are times that they learn bad habits in pre-K. Yes. The thing is, it's not really that they're learning bad habits in pre-K. It's that they're being taught things that they're not ready to do with their body. Their bodies are not ready to make diagonal. Their bodies are not ready to make more than one line at a time. And so what they end up developing as a bad habit is they're trying to please their teacher. They're trying to just get an A on their paper because that's what their teacher wants. And so they make it any old way. And that's where the bad habit comes from. It's because they're being expected to do things that they're not able to do. Someone's saying, is the download from the website the same as the download from the link from this presentation on the screen? Um, well, I thought it was, and I tried to make it that way, but someone is saying that it's not working. So there are more links, and there are more links in the group that you can check. Someone's saying if you send your email on here, I'll be more than willing to email it to you. Just email customer service at missjamieot.com, and I'll get you everything you need. But I will also, as soon as we're done, I will post the link to that. I'm not sure why the link's not working. Someone's saying it worked for me. Make sure you check your downloads. Oh, also guys, make sure you check your spam, because very often if you get an email from a business that it doesn't recognize your email, it may go straight to your spam. So they're saying that it doesn't work. I don't know if the link is wrong or what's happening. But again, email customer service at missjamieot.com and I will make sure I get you what you need, okay? Consistency is key. We want to make sure that whatever program our kids are using, we're using it consistently. We want our parents using the same language and the same worksheets. We want our teachers following through and using consistency, and we want our therapists doing the same thing. Most handwriting programs have a specific language that they use. That's why when I designed my workbook, I put almost no language on it, because I want the children to hear the language of the handwriting program that they're using. So for example, Handwriting Without Tears calls the letters that start with C the magic C letters. The Size Matters handwriting program calls those the super C letters. It's fine. It doesn't matter. It's just important that we're not all saying different things to our kids. We want them to be using the same paper as often as possible. And we want to make sure that we're all practicing the same way. So if we think back to Francesca and Grace and the cheers, it's important that they're learning the same cheer from all the grown-ups in their life the same way. You want to stick with whatever language it is that the child is using or that the child's teacher is using. So for therapists, I know so many OTs who go to like 5 different buildings in a week, and they have so many different teachers that they work with. It can be really hard to keep up with what programs the teachers are using. Hopefully, the district has one program that they use consistently, but unfortunately, that's not always the case. So if you can, and I know it's a lot to ask, but check in with your teacher and see what program they use. A lot of the programs have a free handout on their website with the language that they suggest. So for example, Handwriting Without Tears on their website has a freebie somewhere on their site. I'm not sure where, but it has the language for each letter so that you know when you're instructing the child how to make this letter, that you use these words exactly. The handwriting program, the TV Teacher, has the same exact thing. They have a free handout that you can print out and you can send it home to the parents and just say, please use these words with our kids when you're teaching them how to do the writing. It can be really confusing for kids if we're using all different words and terminology. One day we say up like a helicopter, and another we say, up, 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 up. It just should be the same every way. It's important to also remember that our kids who really struggle with handwriting often do have special needs, and that can mean that they have language and speech issues. So it can be harder for them to process language. So we don't want to make it even worse for them. We want to be consistent. If you're a contract therapist that doesn't work for the district and you don't have access to whatever materials your teacher is using, ask them if they perhaps have an extra workbook, or if they can at least just tell you what program they're using so you can go on the website and get an idea and keep it all the same. I know Foundations uses the plain line and the worm line and the sky line, and then other programs like Handwriting Without Tears only has a top and a bottom line. So again, for kids who have speech and language issues, the easier it is, the better. But you do definitely want to follow through whatever your school is doing and whatever your child's teacher is doing. It's really important. Terry Schultz, thank you so much. You're sharing the link to the freebie from the other page. I appreciate it. I don't know why that's not working. It's bugging me, but I'm going to move on. So I want you to be able to recognize which letter formations and numbers should be taught together. So we're going to look over here on the left. We have capital F and capital E. Obviously, they really look very similar. And if we go back to the cheer again, if our children learn capital F one day, the next day, all they have to do is add one more little line, and now they've learned 2 letters. So that's so much easier for them, and it does build on their previous learning. We're using their motor planning. We're Mr. Miyagiing them. We're adding one more movement, and it will be able to teach the kids 2 different letters. If we look at lowercase c, a, and d, again, Handwriting Without Tears calls these magic C letters, and the Size Matters handwriting program calls them super C letters. But C is the basics for a bunch of letters. So once our kids master C, the next day we can teach them at the end of the C, we go up, down. Now they've learned how to make an A. And they feel super successful because they've learned 2 letters in the same amount of time. Then for the letter D, it's just the same as A, but just up a little bit higher. So now if we compare that to the traditional way of capital A and lowercase a, you can see they have nothing in common except for their sound. And we're not talking about sound generally when we're teaching handwriting. We can, of course, reinforce what sound the letter makes, but motor skills are different than speech skills. So we're asking our kids to make a diagonal left, a diagonal right, a little line across. And then we're asking them to make a little curve and then an up down. And we're saying that these 2 letters go together. But from a child's perspective, they're not similar at all. So it's important for us to think about that and think about how can I set up my child for success by teaching them a foundation and then adding a step to teach them something new. We're going to recognize which letters and which capital letters can be taught together. So you want to look at their letter strokes and or their start spot. So the straight line letters are F and E, and then we have letters that have lines and curves, D, P, B, and R. Our next ones are the pencil pickup diagonals, N and M. Now you might be saying, well, V and W and X have diagonals too. Why aren't you teaching them with N and M? The reason I'm not is because the start spot is the same, but the pencil pickup is different. So for example, F, E, D, P, B, and R, we're teaching our kids to start at the top. They do a line down, and then they've got to pick up their pencil and go back to the top to finish the letter. So they start, and then the sequence is that they pick back up and go back to the top. For N and M, it's the same thing. They start at the top, they go down, then they have to pick up their pencil to go back to the top and finish the letter. For V, W, X, Y, and Z, they're actually going to start in that corner, just like the others, but they don't pick up their pencil, except for X. But they're not, they're not continuing it the same way. They're going for V, down, up. You can look at V and W and say, oh yeah, it's so easy to teach V and W together. Once they master V, it's just one more step to master W. The unique uppercase letters, H, K, L, and U, they also start at that top left corner. So and they have a pencil pickup, except for, oh, no, they don't have a pencil pickup. They all start at that top left corner. So the H, the K, the L start up here, go down, and then we have to finish the sequence. We have the diagonal group that we talked about, and then we have the starts with C letters, C, O, G, Q, and then we have S. So S is a little bit apart because obviously it's a small C that they have to make, but it is still the same motor movement. So we can use that to teach them. They're going to make a small C and then turn around and go home. A, I, T, and J are different than the rest because they start in the center. C, O, G, Q, and S also start in the center. Those are the starts with C letters. And then we have A, I, T, and J. They start in the center, which the rest of the letters all start in the top left corner. I hope that makes sense. So here, this is just an example of how I like to group the letters together. So this is from my workbook that I gave you a link to before. It's not in the freebie packet, but it's in the whole workbook. But you can see how it would make a ton of sense to teach children how to make the letter T and then to turn that T into an I. It's just one more line. And then to combine it, T, I, T, I. It's the same motor movements that they're building on. The same thing is for T and J. Once they learn how to make the T, the next step is J. It's just one little more curve that they're adding on. And now they've learned 2 letters in the same time that they've learned 1. I also included a TJI just to show how they all start at the top, go down. We have the little line across, and then our J has the curve and our I has the little line. I always like to also emphasize the size of the letters. So all the capital letters are always tall letters, and I like to put them in boxes. That's why I put the boxes in the bottom to remind kids that all the capitals are always the same size, and they take up the whole space between the primary handwriting paper. So a couple of people are putting their email address. I'm not going to email you guys the thing. You have to email me. Email me at customerservice@missjamiot.com, and I will get you your handout, okay? Terry, thank you for sharing the real link. I don't know why some people are having success and others aren't. I'm not sure. But for those of you where it says Facebook user, just go to streamyard.com/Facebook, and then I'll be able to see who you are. Okay. So I want to talk about rainbow writing. I love rainbow writing. It is such a great way to create motor memory. It is really simple and fun, and it just makes sense. So I really started using rainbow writing as a handwriting method with this little boy that I had, Jonathan. He was the cutest little thing. I loved him to death, but he really, really struggled in school. When he came to kindergarten, he was motor-wise, his motor skills and his cognitive level, he was probably about 2.5 or 3 years old. So even though he was 5.5 and he was ready for kindergarten, his motor skills and his cognition was so behind everybody else that he was not ready to write, and he wasn't ready to learn how to make letters. So he was so sweet and such a good kid, but he would be like, Miss Jamie, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this at all. And so what I did was I came up with a way to get him to write. We had our routine. I know you don't want to do it, but this is something we need to do. And I wanted him to also be doing what his classmates were doing. So that was important. So I would give him the letters in outline form, and then I'd have him pick 5 crayons, any 5 colors he wanted, and we'd put it on his left side because he was lefty, and he would pick 1 crayon, let's say red, and he would trace within the letter F, and then he would trace within the letter E. Once he did that with his red crayon, he could put it down on the other side of him, and then he was done with red. He would move on to the next color. So by the time he was done, he did every single color, and he ended up with, what we would call a rainbow writing. So he's making 2 letters at once, but also he's practicing the same movements over and over. So he's looking at these letters. We are saying the name of the letters. We were talking about what sound the letters make, but he's making the same movements 10 times because we did both letters at once. And this was something that really ended up clicking with him. Being that I had those crayons lined up, he knew that when he finally got to orange, he was done. There was a light at the end of the tunnel for him, and that was really important. He just wanted to be done because he didn't feel successful. But when he saw where the end of the task was going to be, he felt better. And he was like, okay, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. When I get to the orange crayon, I'm finally going to be done. And so he would do it with me. So these sheets, the F and the E and a bunch of other letters of the groups that can be taught together, are all in your freebie packet. So someone's saying, love the rainbow writing idea. I do what I call tag team writing. So I've seen kindergarten teachers use what they call rainbow writing, and they have basically sight words, and they have the children write the sight word, let's say the, and they'll do the T in red and the H in yellow and the E in green. And their point is to get the children to remember the letters and that says the. For me, I'm more concerned with how often they're going to be making the movement. I don't want them to keep changing crayons in between every 2 minutes. I want them to use their crayon on every letter and then they're done. So it's just a different about what is the purpose of the activity. For me, I wanted them to do that motor movement more times than I wanted them spending time, picking out what crayon that they have. So someone's asking, do you have a simple reference slide about lowercase letters, just like you reviewed uppercase ones in developmental order? Yes, in your freebie packet, there is a 2-page handout with the developmental order that you have for free in your freebie packet. It's right there. But I think we're coming up to lowercase in a little bit. So D, P, B, and R, these again are in your freebie packet. These are the letters that have a line and a curve. So these are not the first letters that I suggest teaching. I suggest the straight line letters first. But by teaching these in a group, you're teaching those same movements over and over. So I put some writing on the side of this slide just to kind of exemplify. But again, I want you to use the language that goes with the handwriting program that your teacher is using. So these letters all start at the top. They have a big line down. They hop to the top. So it's really important that our kids don't just do it any old way. We don't want them to go down for the letter D and then go around, because they're going to end up having it look like an O. And the same for B. When they make their capital B that way, they end up making their lowercase b that way. And then they end up having something that looks like a 6. So we do really want to follow formation. They're starting at the top, at the star, big line down, then they've got to hop back up to the top. So remember before I called that a pencil pickup. And then for D, they have a big curve, but for P, B, and R, it's a little curve and then another movement. And these sheets are just perfect for rainbow writing. V, W, X, and Y. Some handwriting programs teach Y as like the bottom line is straight down. I never teach my kids Y this way, because I find when they see that, they automatically see a V and then a straight line. So what they do is they make a V and then they add a straight line, and it inevitably ends up with a big hole in between the V and the line, and it's all messy. So I try to teach them the letter X first, straight line down, and then straight line down. And then for Y, I teach them, we do a little line and then stop and then straight line down, which is similar. So it's very similar movements. V and W are, very obvious why they should be taught together. But the X and the Y, I like to teach Y with X because I don't want the kids to have that habit of making that V. They do love to do that, but so these are our starts with C letters. They all start with C. Again, Handwriting Without Tears calls it Magic C, and the Size Matters handwriting program calls it Super C. Doesn't matter. Just remember that they all start with C. Once they learn C, then all they have to do is one more movement to turn it into an O or a G or a Q. It just makes sense. So here's the developmental order of the capital letters that I suggest. And again, this is in your freebie, in your cheat sheet. You want to make sure that you're emphasizing the size of the letters because all of the capital letters are tall. They should be the same size. In certain programs, they call it different things. Size Matters, I think, calls it size 1 letters. It doesn't matter. Just stick with what your program says and be consistent. I love to use boxes to teach kids about letter size because I feel like it gives them a little boundary and it helps them to understand a little better how big their letters should be. You also want to make sure that you're teaching the start spots. So again, for E, F, D, P, B, R, and M, all these guys over here, they all start in the top left corner. All of them have pencil pickups except for L and U and V, W, X, Y, and Z. They have a continuous line. The other letters, C, G, O, Q, S, I, T, J, A, they all are called center starters or whatever your program calls them. You want to really emphasize where those letters start because that's going to impact how they finish their letter or what we call sequence their letter. This is a cheat sheet. This is also in your freebie packet about where the start spots are for the letters. So I think for the most part, capital letters are pretty obvious where they start, but some of the lowercase letters can be a little tricky, particularly the letter D. So I always emphasize to teachers that you want to start your D with a C because children really don't reverse the letter C. They just, it's not a letter that's very commonly reversed. So once they master the letter C, it's very easy for them to then take that C and change it into a D. B starts at the top, and we want them to go down, back, up, and over. I have a trick for that. I'll be showing you in a minute. But we don't want them to just go down and around because it ends up looking like a 6. And we don't want them to start their B and their D in the same spot because that's when they start really, really mixing it up and reversing them. The other tricky letters for start spots are lowercase e. He is the only one who kind of starts in the middle of nowhere. That could be tricky for kids. And F also is a little bit off of the top line. The rest of them have pretty common start spots, and I like to emphasize that with kids. If you have a child who's always starting their letters at the bottom, I like to have them actually go through their sheet and put a dot or a sticker or anything fun to put where the start spots are before we even get started. So I every once in a while at the dollar store, they have these teeny itty bitty tiny stickers. And what kids don't love stickers, but I have them peel off the stickers and put them right on the start spot. So then when we go to practice the letters, I'm like, start at the start spot. And they do because they just put a sticker there. So it emphasized that and it really drove it home. Not only do they have a visual cue, but they just did a whole activity about that. Colleen Darrow saying, so you recommend starting with capital letters instead of lowercase letters. So Colleen, that is what is developmentally appropriate. That doesn't mean that that is what is going to work with your curriculum. In my school district, we do start with capital letters, but the point is, and the thing that's really important to consider is that lowercase letters are used 100 times more frequently than capital letters. So what's happening nowadays is that many children are learning capital letters and lowercase letters in preschool. Capital letters are used much less frequently. So if you're pressed for time and you have to get things done and you need your kids to master, you are better off spending your time on lowercase letters. But developmentally, it's easier and more appropriate for children to start with capitals. I hope that answers your question. The thing is that sometimes we are pressed for time, and that's just how it is. And we want our kids to learn how to make lowercase letters properly because they're using them constantly. Their lowercase letters are used, like say 98% of the time, and capital letters are not. So it makes sense then that if you have limited practice time, that you would focus more on the lowercase letters than the capital. But developmentally, it's easier for kids to learn capitals. So if in a beautiful, perfect world, if I was in charge of everything, and obviously I'm not, but I would love to start teaching preschool kids capital letters, like kids who are 4. We can teach them big lines and big letters and how to do things with, gross motor movements and air writing, and get them to learn their letter shapes and things like that. And then when they have more dexterity and more manipulation, then they can start to learn their lowercase letters. So someone's saying the only thing I don't like about rainbow writing is sometimes they don't start in the correct spot if they don't have someone watching them. I totally agree with you, Claire. That's why I always, I always want handwriting to be a supervised activity. It really needs to be. And easy for me to say, I only have 1 or 2 or 3 kids at a time. I can't imagine how the kindergarten teacher feels when she's got 18 to 23 children. How she's supposed to keep an eye on all of these kids, and she has to teach them. It's not an easy answer, but I think it's something that really benefits from being taught in small groups. I like to tell my teachers that when they're breaking the children up into reading groups and they have another group of children, that group of children who are unsupervised should not be doing handwriting. They can be doing other things to benefit handwriting. They can be working on their hand strength, or they could be doing a fine motor activity or practicing cutting. Anything like that would be great, but we don't want to just give our kids sheets and not not supervise them, because you're right. We have to think about it. If they start doing something the same way over and over and over, they're not going to just change the way they do it. It's almost like asking someone to just walk differently. Today, I want you to walk a different way. It makes no sense. You've been walking the same way all this time. You can't just change it. You're used to it. That's why it's important for us to teach our kids how to write the letters before we start handing them writing sheets and also like spelling sheets. That's why I don't like programs that teach a letter, like they're teaching the sound J, and then they have the children write like juniper. Meanwhile, they didn't learn UNIPER. It just doesn't make any sense. It's silly. And if kids get used to making something the wrong way, then they're going to do it that way over and over. So I'm going to get off my soapbox about that, but it's a very common problem. In terms of lowercase letters, you have not half, but a good amount of letters your children already know if you taught capital. So capital C, O, S, V, W, X, Z, they're all identical. So I like to call them mini-me letters. You might call them something else, that's fine. But when you start teaching lowercase letters, if you teach them after capital, you're kind of giving your child an edge because they already know 7 of the letters. So that's pretty cool. They just have to make them a little bit smaller. You also have your starts with C letters, C, A, D, G, O. Then you have your tricky letter E. E is tricky. He just is. Excuse me. He has a funny start spot. And then he's not formed like any other letter, but he's one of the most frequently used lowercase letters. So he definitely needs some extra practice. The driving down letters, I find that these are the letters that children very often make incorrectly because they love to start them at the bottom and they don't follow the movements that they're supposed to. So this is an interesting little tidbit. So many parents and teachers will complain, why do all these kids start their letters at the bottom? I don't understand it. They all start at the bottom. Why do they do it? So they start it at the bottom very often because they start writing when they're too young. Freud says that children, when they're young, think that the whole world revolves around them. So it goes back to ego. And because they think the whole world revolves around them, they start all their letters and all their shapes at their body and they go away. Isn't that interesting? So he says that that's why a lot of the children make their letters from the bottom to the top. Elizabeth Graziano saying it's hard to break that habit. It sure is. It's very hard to break that habit. The straight line letters are pretty straightforward. They're similar to the capitals in that you can teach them together pretty easily because they have similar movements. Then you have your diagonal lowercase letters. Many of them are mini-me's. So again, the kids already know them. They just have to learn how to make them a little smaller. Then you have your unique lowercase letters, and these are not really similar to any other letter except for Q. So Q technically starts with C letter. However, I always suggest to teach him by himself, because if you teach him with the starts with C letters, you don't want the children to confuse Q with G. G is used very frequently and Q is not used frequently at all. So it's best to teach Q later on once your kids have mastered and become really comfortable with G. So this is another example of rainbow writing. Now, I did give the example of rainbow writing, but when you have a sheet like this, or even if you make your own sheet, when you put the letters in groups, it doesn't just have to be pencil and paper or crayons and paper. You can have the kids practice with their finger. You can put a sheet like this in a Ziploc bag and then put shaving cream on top of it and have the kids write on it with their fingers. It doesn't have to be a paper pencil task. It definitely doesn't. You can make it a sensory activity. You could have them roll little snakes of Play-Doh, turn it into a hand strength activity, have them form the letters with the Play-Doh and then write it. You can really change it up. In your freebie packet, there is a whole handout of different examples and ways that you can use these sheets. I think it has 10 different ways to use the sheets besides just rainbow writing. So this was the trick that I was talking about before. Again, a lot of my kids start these letters, the driving down letters, from the bottom. So I came up with a trick to teach them because they thought it was so funny to start at the top and then bounce back up. I told them that these letters bounce up on a trampoline, and I let them say the noise. Kids love to make a noise for some reason when they're writing, because I guess they're not usually supposed to make noise at school. But for R, N, and M, P, H, and B, you start at the star or at the start spot, drive down, and then boing, we back up and over. So they're allowed to touch the trampoline and then they hop, or I shouldn't say hop, they boing, back up and over. We want to discourage the kids from picking up their pencil. So now this is a complete contrast to before when we were encouraging them to pick up their pencil for capital letters. Again, they're much younger when they're supposed to be learning capital letters. So they don't have the dexterity to control their pencil for those small movements and small curves. But research does show that children write neater when they start their letters at the top, and also it's neater and more legible when they're not picking up their pencil to make continuous strokes over and over. So that's why these letters do not have pencil pickups. These trampoline letters, the trampoline trick, kids just love it for some reason, and it just resonates because they get to say boing, and it reminds them to make those letters correctly. So that's a fun little trick. Straight line letters, I always say for I and J, I want a tiny polka dot, not a big fat lollipop. We have so many kids that make that dot right on top of the line, or instead of making a nice, neat little dot, they really, really exaggerate it. And that's appropriate. It's very common, but I try to do the lollipop story because it helps them to remember not to do that. So these are our mini-me letters. In your freebie packet, you have these two, and these are great to teach together. X and Z, exactly the same, just smaller, and the same with V and W and S. S is a tricky one. It really is, because it requires change of direction of the pencil, which requires good fine motor and dexterity of the hand. It can be tricky, but with practice, and you do want to practice it because it's a very, very frequently used letter. With practice, they get it. And here is our lowercase diagonal group, which goes together. So when you are either making handwriting sheets or choosing handwriting sheets, or if you're just working one-on-one with your child, you want to really keep it simple. The example on the left of the capital A with the starts, with all the dots and the arrows, a lot of handwriting programs have all of these visual cues. And visual cues can be very, very helpful for kids. But we want to think back to what we said before about visual milestones. Children are able to close up a shape that's partially drawn when they're 4.5. That's if they recognize what the shape is. So just because that is in front of them, and you and I, we know right away that that's an A, but our kids who are just learning their letters, they might not know that it's an A if it's incomplete. Also, they are very used to trying to connect the dots. So what they try to do is connect the dots rather than making a straight line and learning how to do that with control and fluidity. The arrows can also be really confusing for them. Our kids are still learning left and right and up and down. Arrows don't really mean anything to them the way that they do to us. So sometimes less is better. My preferred way is to use a highlighter. I love to use a yellow highlighter to make the letter that I want them to trace. And now when they trace on top of it, I'm able to see exactly what they did with their pencil. With the dotted line on the left, it's hard to sometimes see, especially if it's been photocopied a lot of times, it's hard to see what the child wrote because all of those dots are in the way. With a nice highlighted one, you can see exactly what they did. So you can say, oh, don't pick up your pencil here, or, oh, you didn't go all the way down to the bottom, don't forget. That works great. The only drawback about highlight is that it's very difficult to photocopy. So as a classroom teacher, sometimes that's just not going to work because obviously you're not going to highlight, a million pages for your kids. And if you do one, it doesn't always photocopy properly. The outline letter is easy to do too. So if you wanted to make your own sheet for a child, you can, on Word, you can use there are some fonts that kind of work. Comic Sans works. You can use Word Art. The problem is that certain letters are really difficult to get looking the way our children are used to seeing them. A lot of them have that typeface A, or they have a curve on their T. So that could be kind of tricky. Kaylin Parsons. Hi, Kaylin. She's saying, what's the difference between the workbook and the 32-page basics? So the 32-page basics has all of the cheat sheets that you need, and it has the letter grouping sheets, like I just showed you, like the V, W, X, Y, all on one sheet. The workbook is more than 100 pages. It has every single letter on its own, as well as together on the letters that are the same. So for example, the X, Y, Z, V, you'd have each one on its own page. So if you wanted to only teach that letter, you could, but you'd also have a page with V and W together on the same page. So you could review them together to drive that motor memory home and really emphasize. That's the difference. The workbook is 100 plus pages. It's really long. And the other one's 32 pages. But the freebie does have the cheat sheet in it that you need. So if you aren't looking to buy a new workbook, then the freebies is really good, I think. But I love the whole workbook. I've been using it like crazy at work because, again, everything's in outline form, which I love. It's easy to photocopy. And I just like teaching the letters together at once. So another aspect of teaching handwriting is self-evaluation. A lot of handwriting programs have a self-evaluation component, and research shows that children should be expected to self-monitor their work and to correct it. So you want to drive home to your kids that handwriting matters, that size matters, that writing on the line matters, and spacing matters. Everything matters. It's important to you, and our kids, they want to please. So it'll be important to them most of the time if it's important to you. So that's a great thing to include, to have them look back at their own work. I like to have kids circle their favorite. Which one did they do perfectly? And I make a big stink over the one letter on the line that's just so beautiful. I can't stand it. I have to get right up and go get a sticker. And they just love that. And then they try to make all of their letters that way. In your freebie packet, we have some things to help you with that. So I'm writing neatly reward chart. This is in the freebie packet. And this is really easy to just cut up and put it on your kid's desk, or you could put it in their pencil box. And then when you catch them writing neatly, you can punch a hole in their thing or give a check. And then when they get 8, they get a little reward. Maybe they get to pick out of the prize box or whatever. You're making it a class-wide system that handwriting matters. And this is really helpful when there's limited time for handwriting instruction, because we're not going to let it fall through the cracks. It's important to incorporate it when you're doing your reading lessons, when you're doing your math lessons. You still want your kids writing neatly. So it's an easy thing to do to just say, oh, I caught you. Great. And you put a star, and then they're happy and they know that you're watching, even though it's not a handwriting lesson per se. The other one is a handwriting checklist. I like to use this with kids who are older. Obviously, they kind of need to be able to read the requirements, but I like to tell my kids to check their grip. I want you to write on the lines, check to see if your letters are tall and small, make sure you spaced properly. I like to laminate these little sheets and put them on the kids' desk, and then I have them grab it when they're done with their work. And I want you to check each one. If you laminate it, they can use a little dry erase marker. Dollar Tree has them 3 for $1, which is great. And the kids love it. So they read it. Did I write on the lines? Check. Tall letters are small, small letters are small. And then they look at what they did and they're like, ooh, they get their eraser. They might fix something and then they get to check it off. So it's, again, just giving a method of self-evaluation to make the kids aware of their own mistakes rather than you pointing them out all the time. We want them to start to care and to self-correct. So we're going to review some concepts. For uppercase, we have our straight line letters, which are F and E. We have our line and curved letters, D, P, B, and R, our pencil pickup diagonals. Then we have our unique uppercase. They're not really like anything else. Now, you don't have to teach these letters in this exact order. If you have a child whose name begins with K, it's okay to teach them K earlier on. But the point is, if you have a kid whose name starts with M, you might want to teach them N and M at the same time, because why not teach them 2 skills at once? And if you teach them N, it's only one more little move to get them to master M. So all of those letters include, and the diagonal letters as well, V, W, X, Y, Z, they all start at the top left corner. Our other letters that start at the top center are our starts with C letters, and then we have our center starting letters. So you want to teach the kids by motor formation, motor memory, as well as by start spot. For lowercase letters, you can review the mini-me letters, which usually goes pretty quickly because if they learned it in capital, they already know it. And now we're just teaching them the difference in the size. Lowercase mini-me letters are small and not tall. Then we have our starts with C letters. And again, C and O are mini-me letters, but I always reteach C before I teach the other letters because we want to drive it home that if we make a C, it's very easy to change it into an A. And the same, we know how to make a C. It's so easy, but all we have to do is go up, down, and now we changed it into a D. So we've learned another letter. E is a tricky guy. He really should be taught by himself. He's the only one that has an extra start spot, but it's really, really frequently used. So it's a good idea to give that guy some extra practice by himself. The driving down letters, I love to use the trampoline trick with these guys. You can use it too. It's in your freebie packet. And then you have your straight line letters. You have your diagonal lowercase letters. I like to teach Y by himself. And V, W, X, and Z are mini-me's. So again, the kids pretty much have probably already mastered them. And then you have your unique lowercase letters. So when it comes to the bottom line, when it comes to handwriting, we want to build on previously learned skills. We want to make sure we give our children time to master something before we rush on to the next move. And again, it's easy for me to say, I'm not in a classroom with 20 children, but this is where we can work together as a team with our parents and our therapists and the rest of our staff to say, oh, you know what? He's having a little trouble with this. Can you help him? Send home the sheets in your freebie packet and tell the parent he's having some trouble with his starts with C letters. Here's some ideas that you can do. And you can send home the sheet of all the different activities to do with those sheets. You have absolute permission to use those sheets to send home. I want you to send them home. I want you to, yes, someone's saying, can they be reproduced for OT students? Please, I want to help as many kids and as many therapists as possible. I just would ask that if you have teachers or therapist friends that might be interested in this, that you would tell them to come to my website and get it themselves. I really want to show you that banner right now, but someone said the link didn't work, so I won't. In the Facebook group that you're in right now watching this video, the link is there like 85 times. So you should be able to get the freebie, but I will post it again when we are done in a moment. Oops, sorry. Someone was asking, how long does it take for our kids to really get it? And research says that 6 weeks is enough time to see a difference in most kids. However, it depends on the kid. We all know that our children are so different, and it depends on how often you're able to practice, how the child's motor skills are, their understanding and their visual memory of the letters. There's a lot that goes into it, but practice does make a huge difference. And we're not going to help them build automaticity without that repetition. Repetition builds motor memory. We want to make sure that we are Mr. Miyagiing those kids. They got to do it over and over and over until it's a piece of cake for them. So I just want to remind you to get your freebies. These are, I think, priceless. I made them, so I probably shouldn't say that. But they're really, really helpful. And again, you can absolutely use them and share them with teachers and colleagues. Someone's saying, where is the link on YouTube? If you go to my YouTube page, it's just YouTube, Miss Jamie OT, youtube.com/Miss Jamie OT. That's my YouTube page. And this link, this webinar is on the YouTube page. 6 weeks, given that they are doing it every day. No, Kaylin, the research usually says that kids should be practicing handwriting a couple of times a week, but that's now again saying teaching it a couple of times a week in one letter at a time. I don't think that the research was about teaching them in groups. Personally, I think it's important that they get some practice every day. So I think sending it home to parents and having them follow through and do a little bit is good. But we want to also make sure we don't overdo it. I had a parent tell me today, oh, the link for the freebie, Therese, I'm sorry, it's on the screen right now. MissJamieOT.com/HW freebie. If you can't get it, someone was saying before they had trouble with it. If you just go to my website, MissJamieOT.com, there's the main page has all the links to everything. So you should be able to just go there, MissJamieOT.com. Someone's saying, do we teach upper formation first or lower formation? We talked about that before. Developmentally, it's important to, developmentally, it's appropriate to teach capitals first. But if you're pressed for time and you need to cover more letters in less time, lowercase letters are used a lot more frequently. So it's really up to you, and it's something that you should work out with your classroom teacher and your school. Everyone should be doing everything the same way. I want to remind you that if you are an occupational therapist, this course is AOTA approved. So you can get AOTA CEUs for attending the course. And this is the link, MissJamieOT.com/HW-CEUs. You just have to take a quick short assessment and then you'll have your AOTA credits. So don't forget about that. And also the workbook. So someone was asking before, what's the difference? The freebie packet, I think, is really helpful. It's 32 pages and it has all the group pages. So you can practice the letters all together. The workbook, though, is really like a handwriting workbook. It has enough practice of each letter. It has 4 lines. Each letter has its own page, and then the groups have a page together. So, for example, you'd have V and W on the same page so that we can build on what the child just learned. If they learned, let's say on Monday, you teach V, and then on Tuesday, you do V and W. So they're practicing their V, and then we add one more movement, and they learn W. And that's all on the same page. You can check out the product page right here, HW Workbook, and you'll see what's included. It's very comprehensive. If you have any issues tonight, if you had problems with the files, if something didn't download, if you don't know how to open a zip file, anything like that, first, definitely check your spam, okay? Because for some reason, the internet loves to send me to spam and junk. I don't like it at all, but that's where they send me. So check that first. And then if it's not there and you tried to download it and it didn't go, also check in your computer in your downloads file. Sometimes it automatically downloads right there and you didn't even see it happen. So check that and then email me customerservice@missjamieot.com and I will help you in any way that I can to get you whatever it is that you need. My references are listed here. I'm not going to go through them because that's a little bit boring, but they are also available in your freebie packet. So if you want to see the things that I referred to and the research that I spoke about, all of these references are available in your 32-page freebie packet. So I want to say thank you very much. I really appreciate you spending time with me on a weeknight, 2 hours of your time. It's so amazing. And it's obvious that you care a lot about the children in your life. So you're here trying to help them and trying to come up with ways to make sure that they feel successful. And I'm hoping that this webinar and the freebie packet will give you some tools and some tricks to do that. Someone saying download the freebie. Oh, Marina, thank you. You're very helpful. Someone's asking about the freebie. You do have to go to my website and you add it to your cart, but it's free. It's listed as $0 right now. It's not going to be free forever, just so you know. It's free right now until November 30th. So do make sure that you download it now. Also, the workbook, if you're interested in the workbook, it's on sale right now for $14.99, but it's not going to be on sale for $14.99 forever. Dana, you're very welcome. I'm so glad that you attend. D. Floyd, do I have to have a zip file opener? I don't think so. If you right click on the zip file, it usually will give you a choice and then you'll click extract all and it should usually just open. Ingrid from Australia, thank you so much for joining me from down under. So many people are saying that they're going to use this program. I'm so excited. It is really helpful. If we buy the CEUs, does it include the workbook too? The CEUs includes the slides. It does not include the workbook, but you do get the freebie packet, but not the workbook. The workbook is separate. This has been great. It's always nice to get new ideas. Thank you, L. Ashley. Thank you, Jean Gross. Any more questions, guys? I'm going to hang out for another moment just to see if anybody else has anything else that they're having concerns with. I really hope that you guys are all able to get the file. Hi, Martisha. Hi. Martisha and I used to work together. She was one of the best OTs around. I miss you. It's always nice to see you too. This was great. All right. I'm not seeing any questions. So oh, you're welcome, my love. My niece attended. I hope you learned some good stuff for your students, Miss Ashley. I sent a question about first and second graders. Someone asked about tips for motor memory. Why is why better to start with a short line and not the... Oh, wow. Now we got lots of questions. Hold on. Let me back up here. Okay. Lorraine, I'm not seeing your question about first and second graders. Did you email it to me or you're saying it's in here? Okay, tips for improving motor memory. So motor memory is the ability to make the letter from memory without a visual cue. Repetition is huge for this. Again, I love rainbow writing for that. And again, you don't always have to do it with a pencil. You can change it up. The sheets that are in your freebie packet, use your creative mind. You can put them on a wall and have kids paint the letters with a Q-tip. You can put them on a cookie sheet and put rice on top of them and have them draw it with their fingers. You can put them in a Ziploc bag and cover them with chocolate syrup or shaving cream or anything, hair gel, and have the kids use their fingers so it's more of a sensory experience. Depends on the child. And also, I also am a big fan of air writing. So you have your kids pointing at something in the room that could be a start spot. Handwriting Without Tears has a little smiley face that they hang in the corner of a door frame, and that goes for the size of the letters. And we have the kids use their whole arm, point at the start spot, big line down, hop to the top, little curve, little line. But it depends on the child. But I would say try to bombard all of their sensory systems. So you want to chant how to make the letter. You want to have them say how to make the letter while they're doing it. You want to have them do it in tactile ways, not just paper pencil, especially if you have a child that's getting frustrated. Try to make it more fun. Have them make it with Play-Doh first and then write it, or have them do it with straws and have them make the shapes, or popsicle sticks, have them form the letters and then write it. It shouldn't all be all work and no play. Handwriting can be fun too. Other toys that you can use to work on handwriting are like Aquadoodle or Magnadoodle. Any of those things are great. Why is Y better to start with the short line? So this is a personal preference for me. I find that when you teach kids to do, okay, so you're saying why to do the long diagonal. Oh, most every letter start on the left side or in the middle. There's no letters that start on the right side. Actually, there's only number 9 starts on the right side. I hope that makes sense. So 9 starts on that side, and I'm trying to do it so it makes sense to you guys. Starts here, and then it's a little curve and a little line. All of the other letters start on that one side. So it's kind of weird to now just start in a different area. Also, if they're learning the letter X and the V and the W, they're already starting to make a diagonal in that direction. So that's why I like to teach them Y the same way. It's the same movement that they've already learned, just a little shorter. I hope that makes sense. Thank you for spending your night with us. You're very welcome, Facebook user. Next time I teach a webinar, you guys, I'm going to put a reminder at the very beginning to tell everybody to sign up so that I can see your names. I don't like not knowing your names. Would you like to share activities for improving motor memory next time? I think we just covered motor memory, so that should be good. Where do we start with the kids? Again, it depends how old your kids are. It depends what they already know. This is important. If your kids are coming into you and they don't know anything, if they're in preschool, then awesome. Start with your capital letters. If they're in kindergarten, then you have to decide if you want to start with capital letters, which is developmentally appropriate, or if you really don't have time to focus on teaching kids how to make all of those letters properly and how to master them, then you may be better off spending your limited time for handwriting on lowercase, because lowercase is used much, much, much more frequently. So that's really up to you. In a perfect world, there'd be plenty of time to work on all of it, but that's not always the way it is. Someone saying, what age should we stop teaching handwriting? Well, I mean, in terms of curriculum, in terms of teaching handwriting practice and having a sheet of handwriting letters, we're hoping that our kids will have mastered print by the end of first grade, or at least by the end of second grade. Generally, they're writing so much by that time that it almost is counterproductive to go back and learn a new way to make the letter. I made a reference before to saying to someone, I want you to walk differently today. Like, that's very hard to do. We're very used to walking the way we walk, and it's the same thing with our kids. They're used to making the letters the way they make the letters. So if they're writing paragraphs and pages, then it's silly to spend time teaching one letter. what you can do is focus on other things that improve legibility. So you can work on making sure that they're spacing properly, making sure that they're self-correcting their work. You can use those little cheat sheets that I gave you in your freebie packet. You can focus on making sure that they're writing neatly or smaller, that they're paying attention to the margins and things like that. That would all improve legibility without actually focusing on making the letters. Lauren David, what is your preferred way to write functional handwriting goals? Could you give us an example of a school-based handwriting goal? So that's a great question. Basically, the kids should be, their goal should be about their handwriting within the classroom. So it shouldn't be, coming to OT and writing something just to write something, although of course they're going to come to OT and practice. We want it to transfer over, like we talked about before, transfer of learning over into the classroom. So a functional goal should be related to what they're producing in the class. And that would be a goal that you could put together with the teacher. So if they're expected to maybe answer a data-based question, or for a younger kid, they're expected to copy 3 sentences from the board. You want to have a measure. You want to say how much they should be writing. You want to say how they're doing it. Are they copying it from the board, or are they copying it from their worksheet? Are they generating it from their own mind? And then you want to talk about what help they need. Do they need moderate assistance? Then they need visual cues. And then you want to give a date that they will achieve this by. So it again depends very much on your curriculum and on what the teacher expects of the child. I like to make those kinds of goals with the teacher and collaborate with them, because really, after all, it is all about the function in the classroom and not about what's happening in our OT sessions. Do I have any teletherapy material like boom cards for handwriting or slides? I do not, Elizabeth. I actually just published a teletherapy activity bundle about sports, but it's not really about handwriting. It does incorporate sizing, letter sizes, and it incorporates visual perceptual skills that go with handwriting, such as visual discrimination and visual closure. I have a free activity that I gave out to my VIPs. I don't know, Elizabeth, if you are a Miss Jamie VIP, a subscriber to my newsletter, because I gave everybody a free teletherapy activity to show what it was like. But I had a category, let's say football, and then the kids had to find, there was letter boxes underneath, and they had to find which letter boxes would fit the word football. So we were talking about tall versus small. And then we had lines of handwriting sentences. Oh, you are one of my VIPs. So go through your emails and look for the one with the subject line. Don't forget to download your free teletherapy activity, because you can check that out. And there's a whole bundle, but it doesn't cover just handwriting or letter formation, to be honest with you. It is more about the components of handwriting, like sizing and the visual perceptual skills that go into it. It does have handwriting at the end, and also visual discrimination skills to look through 2 sentences and find the errors. So the kids have to look through and say, oh, that E is floating, or, oh, this is missing a space. So it's kind of handwriting, but not letter formation like you're saying. Someone said we got baseball. It was great. Oh, good. I'm glad you guys liked it. I had fun making that. Someone's saying I had a parent at an IEP meeting commenting she didn't want an OT goal that should be a goal the teacher is covering, such as handwriting. She has a point. Well, our job is to supplement what the teacher is teaching. So if the child is struggling with handwriting, I don't see any problem with us working on it. I could see where the parent has a point, but it's also that OTs work on whatever is impacting the kids in the classroom. So the teacher is covering handwriting, but if that child needs additional support, then why can't we also work on it? That's my opinion. Okay, these were some great questions, everybody. I really appreciate you staying with me for so long. It's almost 9 o'clock at night. I'm sure you're all exhausted. I know I am, but it's so great to be with colleagues and other grown-ups that want to help kids as much as I do. So I really do appreciate you, and I'm so glad that you came. And I appreciate that you joined my group, because I do plan on having free webinars throughout the year, here and here. This one will be available until November 30th. So if you have any friends or any colleagues who are interested in taking the course or you think who might benefit from it, then please tell them to join the group and they can watch the webinar for free. And then it will be available for them until November 30th. Elizabeth, this is the link. I just put it on the screen right here. It's missjamieot.com/HWCEU. That's the link to get the CEUs, okay? Thank you for attending. Okay, guys, I am off to answer some customer service. Hopefully there's not a ton of requests for the freebie. I'm really hoping that you guys were all able to get it. Someone saying, thank you so much. Very worth it. We'll share with my colleagues. Thank you. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. The letter groupings do make so much sense, right, Lorraine? It just, I mean, why teach one thing when you can teach it really well and then teach one teeny itty bitty more step and get them to feel more successful? It does. It just makes sense. So I'm glad that you think so too. All right, guys, have an awesome night. And I appreciate you. Thanks for coming. Don't forget, if you're a New York OT or PT, please, please, please go to my Facebook page and answer the survey. I really need people to take that. It will help me. Okay. Thanks, guys. Good night.